Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. Leaders, how in these days do you become an encourager? And I'm not just talking about, okay, hey, nice job. I mean someone that oozes encouragement day in and day out, that becomes the thing that is in the front of your mind every single day. Well, I got to talk to optimism expert and professional encourager, Andrea Johnson, and she is an encourager, but she's been extremely successful at doing that. And listen in as she will guide you the way where that could be the thing that is on the top of your mind every single day. She also will break down DISC the way you've never heard it broken down before. You don't want to miss a second of this. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I have to tell you that I have got someone that if you don't have, you got to have a pulse. If you don't get lifted up by this guest that I have, then I'm sorry, man. I'm just going to jump right in and introduce her, and I'm going to try to say her title with a little less enthusiasm, but maybe I'll just let it go. Optimism expert and professional encourager. I love that. Andrea Johnson is with me today. I should also say Andrea is a certified John Maxwell leadership trainer and coach. She's also a certified DISC consultant. We're going to talk a lot about that. And she's also a podcast host. I'm going to give her plenty of time to talk about that a little bit later on as well. Andrea, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, man. You make me sound awesome.
You are. You absolutely are awesome. And so speaking of that awesomeness, I want to hear a little bit more about your backstory because I'm so curious, and I know the audience will be too, as to how you became such a great encourager. There's got to be some life stories and life lessons there that has led to your growth. So I want to give you plenty of time and space. Tell us a little bit about your backstory and what's led you to do what you're doing now.
Sure. I think, Kenny, we all lead with what we need. And when we figure out ways to meet those needs in ourselves, then we can meet them in other people. Yeah. And I am very familiar with, so we'll talk DISC in a little while, but I'm an ICD. So therefore I'm a natural extrovert. I'm a natural cheerleader. I really enjoy that. I see things in other people that they may not see. And so I learned early on how to do that and how to hang out with people in ways that kind of made them feel better. I wasn't always great at it because I needed that myself. And I didn't understand that until I was an adult. But as an adult, I started a personal growth journey back when I was about 20 years old, and I put myself in the hospital for bulimia and depression. And my parents were missionaries. I grew up overseas, so I traveled around the world, not in 80 days, but long before I hit 17. And so I had a very big worldview and lived in Southeast Texas for college. And it was just a hard transition. And once I kind of started this journey of personal growth, is saying, wait a minute, who am I? Right. And that the first person we have to lead is ourselves. And yes. So that was my beginning of my journey. It continued through understanding a little bit more of myself through Myers-Briggs, understanding a little bit more of myself through doing Franklin Covey stuff. And the very first list of values that I put down in my Franklin Covey planner, trying to figure out ways to help me not just live life well, but to figure out how to be able to thrive. And that journey is never easy, and it's never alone, and it's also never fast.
Yeah.
I wish I could say it was fast.
Yeah.
But fast forwarding a little bit to I guess 2003, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, which really got my attention. I was, my background is, if I say I'm in corporate, it was actually upper university, not upper management,
Right.
higher education
Higher
in
education. Sure.
graduate school. So I spent nearly 25 years in split between Johns Hopkins Oncology Center and the University of Virginia in research administration in their School of Medicine. And so I knew a lot of things. And there's, depending, I don't know your exact background, but when somebody leaves corporate, you have all of that information that you carry with you. And
Yes.
one of the things that was really nice for me was that my mother was able to get some breast cancer treatments, because this is up in Baltimore and they were in the Richmond, Virginia area. She was able to get some cancer treatments there, but it really got my attention. And at the time, I was about 310 pounds. And if you can see me on video, I'm 5'1.5".
Wow.
And I
Okay.
have, I just realized I didn't put my rings on it.
Yeah.
I have a size 4.5 ring size. So I'm a little person.
Yeah.
And at 310 pounds, that was not healthy at all. And I was doing some workouts this morning and I was like, yep, my knees are still feeling it. But because it's a lot on your bones.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
I elected to have gastric bypass surgery 18 and a half years ago. And it's the best decision I ever made. But in that was another big catalyst for me. My mother getting cancer, and she had lupus before that. So we had these things going on. And I watched a really strong woman. I watched her do things that people didn't realize she was doing. And when I decided to go through gastric bypass, because I couldn't get control of it, I had a counselor that I saw for the whole entire time, before, through, and after. And he looked at me one day and he said, I have to tell you, this is the most courageous thing I've ever watched anybody do.
Wow.
And, for most of us, Kenny, the things we do in our lives, they're not courageous. They're just living our life and doing what we need to do.
Yes.
And so that planted another seed. I'm like, am I courageous?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about that. But when I started looking at that and kind of really working hard, I found out too after that I was in early menopause at 38.
Wow.
And so we started a private adoption journey, and I took my now 14 and a half year old son to school this morning, to the
Wow.
very last few weeks of his 8th grade.
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot that I've been through. But in 2017, we lost my mother to breast cancer. And if you've lost someone, there's someone close to you, grief is a very good catalyst. It really kind of brings out, it shows you where you're squeezed, and it shows you the things that you really need to work on. And what I realized was I was allowing myself to be defined by other people. I was allowing, even though I was on this personal growth journey from at this point, I was 50. My mother died when I was 50. And so I was on this personal growth journey for about 30 years. But it was just a slow burn. And all of a sudden the temperature went.
Wow.
And it really made me, I was like, I don't want to end up at 70 if I get diagnosed with breast cancer, or, whatever. I don't want to end up not doing what I could have done, because I believe we're all created specifically for a purpose, and it's way bigger than we could ever imagine.
No doubt.
And so I said, I got to do something else. I got to figure this out. And so I just sat down and really started kind of combing through who I am. And a friend of mine had said, if you ever want to do like John Maxwell thing, I'd never even heard of him. Right now, here's another piece of background. My parents were Southern Baptist missionaries. And so my husband's a Southern Baptist pastor. And so Maxwell is huge in a lot of pastoral circles because he's a pastor, right?
Yes.
So it was very normal, and I'd never heard of him. So I wasn't on that big of a personal growth journey. But no, that episode, or that period of time in my life, my son was only 8 years old, and I was like, I want to be able to take my son all over the world. I want to be able to show him the things I learned. I want other women to look at me and say, that's what I want to be. And here I was, stuck in a corporate job, and I had tried to be an entrepreneur several times. I was an Amway distributor. I was a Mary Kay lady. And I said, this is I was managing people and I realized I just didn't like it. I don't like managing people. I don't want to help people stay and do the machinery of the organization. Some people are great at that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
Every single administrative assistant that came into my office, it was like, how can I help you grow?
Mm-hmm.
And so my friend was like, you're doing this already. I'm like, doing what? You're a coach. I'm like, a what? And that was kind of the genesis. She planted, and this is, my friend does this, she plants seeds.
Yes.
And if we're good leaders, that's what we do for other people. And the seeds started taking shape and germinating, and I started figuring out who I wanted to be. And my mother was it's an old-fashioned word, but a very sanguine woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like a bottle of champagne. You just pop that cork in the bubbles, and everybody would just experience her joy. If you are of an age, you watched maybe Cheers, and Norm would walk into the bar and everybody would say, Norm.
Yeah.
Well, my mother would walk in and everybody would say, Judy.
Yeah.
And I'm not by nature 100% that kind of person. I said, I'd rather be that. I'd rather work at being something more like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where that all came from. And I came up with intentional optimism after I put it all on paper everywhere. And that was the main pieces that got me to kind of where I am today.
Wow. What a journey. And so we had a Franklin Covey Daytimer reference there,
Mhm.
and a Cheers reference, but in between, and you'll see this on video, your face is different when you talked about your mom. And I
Mm.
love that you had that encourager in your life, and you saw her do some amazing things. It really, I just love how that led to you doing what you're doing now. What a fantastic journey. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And that encouragement, I also, I just made myself a little mark when you had said that the doctor that was getting ready to do your surgery encouraged you, said this is one of the most courageous things that, I've ever seen. And we all need that, because we let those kind of self-doubts can come in, to us. And when we hear someone else validate something that we've made a decision, I'm sure you thought long and hard about it. That means so much to us. And it's so great that you're bringing that now into leadership. Um, I want to ask you
Can I
now.
make one
Oh, of
point of,
course,
yeah.
please.
So that was actually my counselor that said that. So this
Oh,
was
okay.
basically my therapist. My surgeon, however, said, because I actually did try to do the gastric band first, and I got,
Yeah.
my insurance said no. So it was a year-long process just trying, because I did like the whole insurance, can I please? And they're like, no, you have to do the gastric bypass. All right. So I did think long and hard about it.
Yes.
My surgeon said, I have just this sense that you're going to be like the poster child for this surgery. And here I am,
Wow.
this many years later. And every time I tell somebody that, I'm like, I need to get in touch with that surgeon and let her know she
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
we don't realize the things that we say to people, offhanded remarks.
Yes.
We just don't realize that they matter.
Yeah. Yeah. They stick with you. You remember them years and years. All of us could probably think of something a teacher said to us back in the second grade and go back to that. Oh, I love that. So that then it was two people that encouraged, which is great.
Mhm.
Um, I want to really jump into this for a few minutes, if that's
Sure.
okay. And I
Yeah.
think that uh, I'm seeing less and less companies use this. Sprint and T-Mobile was from where I spent most of my career with, 25
Okay.
years. And we used it a lot and didn't use it much in the last year or two. But we started using that even to hire, which was great. But there's a lot of folks, I think, that may listen to this or watch this that don't even know what DISC is. So would you be willing to just a quick overview of what DISC actually is?
Sure. As a matter of fact, yesterday morning I was speaking to a local networking group and doing a DISC presentation, and I give DISC to all of my clients. And that's kind of the basis for where we start. But in a nutshell, it is a behavioral analysis tool.
Hmm.
It takes into account your internal wiring, like how you're created, your basic ways of communicating, the nurturing that you had, and the current environment you are in.
Hmm.
So I geek out on all the different types. I mean, I know my Enneagram, I know my Myers-Briggs, my Clifton Strengths, human design. I know all of it, right?
Wow.
But DISC, but part of that is, Kenny, they all measure something different. And
Yes.
when we only, and maybe that's why some companies aren't using it, is DISC very much measures your communication and your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different in different environments.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an acronym, DISC. I almost said DISC. It stands for the four different types. If you in your mind have a quadrant, an XY axis, if you will, and it starts the top left and goes clockwise. I'm an I, so this is not normal for me.
Yeah.
So the D is, some call it dominant or driver. These are about 3% of the population. They're very bottom line people. They love results, right? So these are, it's good that they're only 3%. Otherwise we'd be changing every day, right? I mean, it's just, these are the change agents, and sometimes they will change just for change sake because they get a little bored. So D is the first one. I is the influencer, and they're about 17% of the population, or excuse me, about 11% of the population. And these are the people who are your happy-go-luckies. They love being in front of people. They are usually pretty outgoing and very people-oriented. And because that's the other thing is, it's the XY axis is on outgoing or reserved, and then right to left is people or task oriented. So going around the clock, you have the I's who are very people, very outgoing. The next one is the S, and that stands for steady. And this is about 69% of the population. They're the backbone of all your corporations. They're this is why we have teams, right? They are team players. They don't like a lot of change. So if you've ever seen the change management bell curve with your early adopters, those would be your D's and your I's. And then your middle of the road is that giant bell curve. That's all your S's that will get. Some of them will be early, depending on how well you nurture them. And then the last one that's going to change is all the way over on the left in the bottom of this quadrant is the C, which some people call compliant or creative or conscientious. I think that's another one. They're about 17% of the population. And I used to say, these are your accountants and your IRS people, but you know who else they are? They're your musicians, they're your artists. They're the people who are they can be a little moody, but they want all the details. They want the facts. So when you have all of these different types of personalities showing up in your organization, in your family, in your church, sometimes it's like speaking 4 different languages at a minimum. And growing up overseas, that's a really good analogy for me. But I think being in New York, you might be around a lot of different cultures where you speak different languages.
Yeah.
And, I watched Americans do this a lot, or a lot of English speakers will encounter someone who doesn't speak English. And instead of trying to figure out, which now we can do with the phone, right? We can say, Google Translate, right? But growing up, we didn't have that option. And so, you know what we would do? We would say, where's the bathroom? And they would say, no comprende. And he would go, where's the bathroom?
Louder,
right?
yes.
Louder and more enunciated and in their face.
Yes.
So I find, Kenny, that we do this to each other based on the language that we might speak in DISC, right? So this wonderful little group that I had yesterday morning, this networking group, one of the gentlemen said, oh, I already know this, I'm a DC. And I'm like, oh, wow, you're totally task oriented. Well, it's the financial planner. So that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But he said he had a client in his office that he's trying to help work through their plan, who is 100% a C, very detail oriented, all the facts. And he's like, trust me. And they're like, I don't think so. And so, he had to tap into his own ability to take their spreadsheet and figure it all out for them so that they could see all the information. When we understand how someone else, and we see patterns consistently, right? When he could see this person really needed the answers, to just remember, it's not they're not trying to catch you on something. They need the information to make the decision. And an I doesn't really care about all the details.
Right.
And I just really wants, can we move on to have fun?
Yes.
And that's very much a stereotype, but at the same time, an S kind of just wants to make sure we all get along. And we move forward with what are the group goals and the group values, and are we all staying within the lane here, and people tend to think that a dominant is going to be more bossy, but I find every single bossy person in my life and in my clients are all S's, because they're really focused
Yes.
on making sure we have the team goals, which is really good, right?
Yes.
So you mentioned companies using them in hiring processes and that kind of thing. We do have that ability to benchmark and to like figure out the best kind of person to hire. Problem is, nobody in an interview is 100% authentic, and we cannot see their work ethic.
Exactly. Yes.
So there's a way in which I don't offer that as often personally, but I do tell my clients too, if you take it, it's a 10-minute test. It's
Yeah.
so fast.
Yeah.
Most of my clients say, was that the test that I finished it too fast? It was too easy. I know, it's really accurate.
Yeah.
But most of them, if they want to do it at home, I tell them you need to do a separate test, because you need to do a separate assessment, because your environment plays a part in your behavior.
Yes.
So that's why we call it behavioral analysis. I hope that's a good wrap
Oh
up.
my gosh, that was so outstanding. What a great overview.
Very fresh.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. Andrea, have you seen DISC evolve a lot over the last few years? And if so, how?
I don't know that I've personally seen it evolve.
Okay.
I think I have evolved in the way I use it. And
Okay.
and I think that that's one of the things about being a trained Maxwell or certified Maxwell team member, and is that the information that we're given, these are tools, right? If you and I are both carpenters and we each have a saw and a hammer, we're going to use them differently.
Yes.
And so I think that that's part of what is a growth area for coaches or consultants, is to figure out how to use the tools that you have. And I use them to help people understand each other and to help communicate.
Yeah.
And then we kind of move on. Every once in a while, I'll send them back to, because I work with clients on like a 6-month basis, either corporate or private. And every once in a while I'll say, let's revisit this thing, right? But I will tell you, it can be very effective. Even I have a retail establishment that I frequent often, and one of the ladies at the counter was just like, oh, I have to tell you, we're having trouble. And I'm like, what do you mean? And it was like a little chain thing. They couldn't hire me to come in and like, what are you talking about? And so it turns out they were having communication problems.
Yes.
And I said, I have something for you, because out of this 30-page DISC report that Maxwell Leadership gives you when you take the $49 test, there's this wonderful page that I call the cheat sheet. It's like a crosswalk, and it just kind of says, if the person you're trying to communicate does these things, you might want to speak to them this way, because they're probably a D, or they're probably an I. Speak to them this way.
Yes. And
so I just printed that out and I handed it to them, and they put it on their break room wall. And I went in the next time, and they said, she literally pulled me out of the line. She's like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. And I said, what?
Yes.
And she said, within 15 minutes, we had all kind of chosen our own and confirmed that in each other. And she said, immediately we understood why there were communication problems. So I don't use it I use it for some personal growth, but a lot of it is just establish awareness. And then I use it for communication and leadership. And that's really what because you can get a DISC from anywhere. You can go online and you can do a free one. And a lot of other consulting organizations use it, but every report is a little bit different, and ours is based on communication and leadership. So that's what I use it for.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And it really can be such a great basis for leaders to not only know themselves, that's obviously the first thing, but then how am I going to communicate with this person? What's going to be the best way of communicating with them? Thank you so much for that. I want to get to a couple of things while I have you. Intentional optimism. I love that you say that. Why is that so important for leaders?
Well, if we're going to go back to Maxwell, in the 15 laws of leadership, the very second law is intentionality. And it has, or maybe that's the 15th law. Either way, it's one of them. And it has to do with, I shared my mother was sanguine. And if you have done any personality tests where you see the 4 quadrants and you look at the choleric and the melancholy and the sanguine and the I've forgotten the phlegmatic. That's what it is. Those are the really old names, and DISC isn't exactly that, but it's very similar.
Yeah.
And the term sanguine is old, and I really wanted to kind of use that in my business name. And my friend was like, nobody knows what that means. And she said, "You're really optimistic." And I said, "I know, but I'm not an optimist without realism. I'm not an optimist that doesn't understand the world, that doesn't have to tap into my own need for wisdom and courage and all of those things." And another word that was used about me all the time is people said, "I knew when you were coming because I could just hear you clop, clop, clop." Because, I'm a woman, I wear heels, right? I'm only 5'1", I wear heels. Clop, clop, clop down the hall. And I said, well, I'm always going someplace. I'm not just wandering.
Yes.
And that's where kind of it's like, intentional came up. And so when I shared a minute ago about kind of putting all of my thoughts and all the things that were important to me, who do I want to be? Who do I want to be remembered as? What is it that I want to be able to offer to the world? And that's kind of a scary thing to think I might be a thought leader. That's a big title, right, to have out there. And it's taken me a few years to kind of grow into it. But when I put all of that down and I kind of batched them all together, there were 6 main areas, and I call them tenets, because a tenet is something that it's not a rule, and it's not it's almost a guideline, right? It's like, these are things that I try to live by. So I call intentional optimism my own personal growth lifestyle. And it's within my own personal leadership structure. I start with the core values, which we haven't talked about, but I have a course on that. And I think it's really important. And then I kind of go out to, this is how at first we know who we are. And then we go out to DISC, which is, this is how we communicate that to others and how we graciously meet them where they are. And then on a regular basis, encompassing everything, is this personal growth lifestyle of intentional optimism. And just really quick, the 6 tenets are optimistic, which includes hope and planning, present, which includes wonder and beauty, energetic, which includes excitement and understanding where my energy comes from and knowing myself and sharing that with other people. And number 4 is courage. That one comes up a lot for me. And then number 5 is wise or wisdom. And that includes respect. And courage includes adventure and all those kinds of things that sometimes I get a little afraid to do. But wise includes respect and understanding our words and that kind of thing. And then the 6th one is, the last one is intentional, because if we don't have a plan to do all these other things and we don't set that intention to do them, it's never going to happen. So that's kind of my own personal, like I said, I take some of the Maxwell stuff and some of my stuff, and it's my own personal growth leadership.
That is so awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so awesome. I think I'll get in at least one more question here.
I'm fine. Go ahead.
Why are women uniquely qualified to be leaders?
I actually heard this the other day. I was like, somebody's echoing it. I'm like, yay, it's not just me. But when men traditionally get into a leadership position, and this is what we've seen in corporate and in our pretty much our history in the United States, especially, it's very competitive. It's like always trying to one up the next one. And so we as women have bought into that, right? And it's like, we did the power suits. We're all trying to one up the next one. And there's only one woman in that corporation, so I'm going to be it, and I'm going to be at the top. And it's stepping on each other. Not all men are that way. This is a stereotype. Okay. But traditionally, men and male energy is when they get knocked down or when they're under adversity, they tend to either, and this is kind of normal, we like fight, flight, or whatever. And so men are more likely to either fight or run away. And there's nothing wrong with either one of them. Both are good. Women are more likely, when they're under stress and pressure, to collaborate and to nurture. And there's some things about our culture that are really great for women, like we are kind of nurturing, most of us. And sometimes that's like, that's all you're supposed to do. And then, no, that's not. We bring an element and an energy to leadership that men just don't have. Just like men bring an element to leadership that women don't have. We need both, right? We need all of it. And there's an Asian I grew up in Korea, right? If you look at the Korean flag, you will see the Asian yin yang symbol on the Korean flag. And that's like the masculine, feminine energy. It's like all of it together. It's like we have to have both.
Mhm.
We celebrate that in every other aspect of life.
Yes.
And for some reason in leadership, there's one way. Right. And I came up against that a lot in university administration.
Mm.
My boss, who I could never get above, was 6'3", blonde haired, blue eyed, and MBA.
Mm.
And, and it's like, I look like I have blonde hair, but it's not. It's traditionally, I mean, it's actually originally brown, and part of my own authentic movement is I'm letting the gray grow in. So you get some of the
There you
first
go.
pictures.
Yeah.
But so for women, we are uniquely wired differently.
Yes.
We are more likely to link arms and collaborate. We are more likely to encourage each other. We are just more likely to do it. It's part of the way our DNA works.
Yeah.
And we've been trained to not do that. So we're having to unlearn a lot of it. But that's why I call it unconventional leadership.
Yes.
Because it's
Yes.
different than the norm.
Yes, it is. Yes. It is so true what I can not say how many hundreds of male leaders I've come across in my lifetime that always feel like they got to do it themselves. That just no, I don't need any help. Let me do it myself. And it was always the opposite and I've had the honor of having some phenomenal female bosses but they always got, Kenny, you need to get some help on this, or they would get help themselves. It's so true what you say.
And that's when we're
Yeah.
aware, and that's when we're
Yes.
mature, and when
Yeah.
we are growing. Those things are the really good aspects of what we can do as women. And I think COVID has really kind of given us an opportunity. Many of us didn't have to be in the office, so we were able to work from home or work remotely, which means that the whole paradigm of how we work is changing. Why not take advantage of fully changing that paradigm
No doubt.
as we kind of come into this whole new normal? I think
Yeah.
we're on the cusp. It's just a really great time.
We are. Absolutely. Andrea, this has been fascinating, and I think we just scratched the surface. I'd love to spend like 25 more hours with you. Just it is
Okay.
yeah. We got to make that happen. This has just been fascinating.
Okay.
I want to, before I thank you and everything, I want to give you any. And it doesn't matter the amount of time. Talk a little bit about your podcast and where people can go for that. And you said you might have something interesting coming up.
I do.
Yeah.
So, I kind of shared that it's taken me a while to kind of grow into this idea that I'm a thought leader. And part of that is, I've been trained as a woman, no, but part of it is, like I said, I'm also an Enneagram person. I'm an Enneagram 6. So it's really hard for me to trust myself.
Oh, wow.
But my podcast has been around, I think Monday, May 1st is episode 125, I think.
Wow.
So we've been
Wow.
around for about 3 years, and currently it is called Intentional Optimists, Unconventional Leaders. And it is on every place you find podcasts. It
Mhm.
is a podcast for female leaders. And the goal is, I started off with every other episode was an interview of an unconventional leader. I've interviewed women in Africa. I've interviewed women in New York. I've interviewed women in Australia. I've interviewed women right down the street. My son's kindergarten teacher. I've interviewed them all because I want women to hear that they can be a leader no matter what they do or where they are. That's
Yeah.
the whole premise behind being an unconventional leader. It's with our skills in my strengths and my area, exactly where I am and what I do. So I actually take the intentional optimism and I show people this is where it showed up in this interview for this person. But for the first 100 episodes or so, I actually I taught a lot of the tenets of intentional optimism, and I did my own solos. And the thing that's coming out new is probably somewhere around June. I'm kind of consolidating all of this together in a new hub to finally really own being the thought leader that I am. And I'm starting a Patreon membership that will be that it will include a private podcast feed. I've already recorded a bunch of solo episodes there. My friend and coach calls it Andrea Unleashed.
Wow.
So I'm still, as we
Yeah.
grow, there's a certain amount of things we're still kind of not comfortable saying to like an audience that isn't behind a paywall or whatever. But I decided, you know what, I want to do this as a way to kind of help build the brand of intentional optimism. So we're going to have like just a $5, just to get in with the private feed. I have merchandise in there. I have and now that I'm recording new guest interviews, I have extras from my guests that will be in there. I have a group coaching program that I'm going to fold into that as an extra tier. And so all of that is very exciting to me because it's time. I have a book. I need to trademark my intentional optimism so nobody listen to this.
Yes.
I expect to not hear that somebody else has done this. But it's time to do all of those things. And so I do have some courses, and all of those are available. My podcast will give you information. My husband listens to it and he's like, I like your solos better. I'm like, well, then you can pay to be in Patreon, baby.
There you go.
But it's just an opportunity to give people a chance to say, yeah, I really want to do this. I really want to support this, and to kind of really flesh out the whole idea that this is a leadership lifestyle. This is a personal growth lifestyle. And it's like now every single episode I do is all video and audio inside Patreon. And so that'll be coming soon. I need to just do a coming soon page and let people sign up.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is so fantastic. And I'll make sure we put that out there in the show notes. How can people get in contact with you because I know there's a website there as well.
Sure. I am theintentionaloptimist.com. And I'm on all the socials. I actually my VA got me on TikTok, so I'm even there. So, but the best places are Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. I do have YouTube. The other thing I do is my guests is I interview them the week because I get their stories on my podcast. And then the week that the podcast airs, if I can't do it that week, I try to do it very quickly thereafter. But I interview them for like 30 minutes live, and it goes to YouTube, LinkedIn Business, and Facebook Business. And I let them kind of do their teaching. So not only do you get their story, but then you get their teaching. That's great. That's easy to access as well. So I'm findable, Andrea at The Intentional Optimist, if you want to email me. And I love relating to people and connecting with people. So
the professional encourager, optimism expert, Andrea Johnson. Thank you so much for joining me today. And God bless everything you're doing. And you're just doing it to help so many people. And I know you already have, but I just sense that you are going to help. The floodgates are going to open for you. There's no doubt about it. Thank you so much for all your time today. It was just absolutely amazing, every second of it. So we're going to leave it there. Oh, you're welcome. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast with Kenny and Andrea, and we'll talk to you real soon.